Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Toolkit launch event for the Act on Endo Toolkit. My name is Natasha Orr, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of British Columbia and a research volunteer with EndoAct. And I'm stepping in for our communications team lead, Aditi, to moderate tonight's event. So with me are Kate Wahl, who is also a PhD student and the executive director of EndoAct, and Emily Rowan, who is a government relations specialist and our advocacy team lead. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that in the land we now refer to as Canada, we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, each of which have their own unique traditions and histories. EndoAct is grateful to these people for their stewardship of the land and recognizes the importance of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's call to action and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Since people are joining from across the country, I want to invite each of you to take a moment and acknowledge the people whose lands you are joining from today. We also want to acknowledge that this week has been a really hard week for the international endometriosis community as we sit with the intense grief, anger, and emotion over our unnecessary loss of Aubrion Rodgers. Our deep sympathies go out to her husband, Anthony, her family, and the community of people who supported her in her journey. This is hard, this is real, and we carry Aubrion's story in our hearts and in the work with the other stories of other people with endometriosis who are also being failed by the system every day. Changing that system is why we are here today. In today's session, Emily and Kate are going to answer 4 key questions. What is a national action plan? Why is the Act on Endo Toolkit focused on a national action plan? How can we make a national action plan happen? And what is the Act on Endo Toolkit? If you have any questions about the toolkit during this presentation, you can ask and vote for the questions on Slido. To do that, follow the link in your event invitation email, or you can go to slido.com and search for Act on Endo, which is all one word. And once we've wrapped up this presentation, Emily and Kate will answer the Slido questions. So I will now pass it over to Kate.
Thanks, Natasha. So like Natasha said, the first question on our list is, what is this National Action Plan? And when we say National Action Plan, what we really mean is a formal policy document created by government to address critical issues like endometriosis by outlining a clear goal, steps to achieve that goal, a timeline for achieving that goal, and funding to make it all happen. So that's the definition that we work with. One really important feature of that terminology, National Action Plan, is that it's led by the federal government rather than provincial or territorial governments. And that seems obvious, but it's an important distinction because the type of government that's creating the plan impacts what kinds of steps they can take. So for example, in Canada, the federal government is responsible for funding healthcare services, setting national healthcare service standards, health promotion, and research. On the other hand, the provincial and territorial governments are responsible for managing, organizing, and delivering healthcare services. So when we talk about or ask for a national action plan on endometriosis, we have to ask for things like funding and other things that are in the federal government's area of responsibility. Next slide, please. All right, so that's kind of the high-level general description of a national action plan, but let's take a quick moment and look at a real-world example. So Australia is the first country in the world to have a national action plan on endometriosis, and the government there released that plan in 2018. So thinking about the features of a national action plan that I just described, it does have a clear goal, which is a tangible improvement in the quality of life for individuals living with endometriosis, including a reduction in the impact and burden of the disease at the individual and population level. So check, there's a clear goal. They also included steps towards achieving that goal, specifically 44 actions across 3 priority areas. So education and awareness, clinical management and care, and research. In terms of timeline, this is one thing in the Australian National Action Plan that isn't so clearly spelled out. And I think that can be a real learning for us here in Canada to say that we want an action plan with a clear timeline towards the goals and indicators for measuring progress as we move along in that work. In terms of funding, the Australian government has put some money behind their National Action Plan, $22.5 million so far. And they've indicated that that's really just a first step in the renewed commitment to action on endometriosis. So that's a tangible example of what we're talking about when we say National Action Plan. If you're curious to learn more and nerd out about it, it is available online. If you just search National Action Plan Endometriosis Australia, it'll pop up and you can read through the whole PDF to see what they've done and how they've done it. Next slide, please. Okay, so I talked about what a National Action Plan is, and I think the logical next question is, well, why is that the focus of the Act on Endo toolkit and campaign? And that's a totally fair question. And that's something that our team of volunteers has thought about a lot when we started out in this work. And we kind of asked ourselves, the provincial governments are responsible for the delivery of healthcare and the federal government's responsible for funding. So which of those two governments do we want to target? And what is it that we actually want from them when we approach them with our ask? And starting maybe first with the levels of government, we chose the federal government, and we did that for two reasons. So the first is we wanted to start with advocacy that will benefit everyone in Canada with endometriosis, not people in any one particular province. Along with that, when we were kind of doing our early learning, we learned that when the federal government makes additional funding available to the provinces for healthcare delivery, so let's say, for example, they're like, here's a pot of money to help provinces create centers of excellence for surgical care. It's a lot easier for the provinces to do that work if there's extra money rather than finding it within their existing budgets to do. So in other words, a national action plan might help create financial incentives for provinces to improve care. Okay, so we've answered this question about why the federal government. I think the next part of the question is why a national action plan. So I'll talk you through that decision too. The question here is really what do we want, right? And at the end of the day, I think we all want people with endometriosis in Canada to receive the right care in the right place at the right time. But governments can be a bit like people, and if you give them a huge task, it's hard for them to make progress on that task, especially they have a lot on their plates. They're trying to get us out of a pandemic. They're dealing with inflation. There's a lot going on. So by asking for a national action plan, we're able to say, here's a tangible first step that you can take to help these people who really are in need of your help and support. And we know that you want to do that. So here's a roadmap for how it can happen. And if you want, here's the Australian example to show you how a country that's really similar to Canada has achieved progress. So that's one reason for the National Action Plan ask. And the second reason for that is, and I think something that really lies near and dear to all of our hearts is a national action plan can be created with and for people with endometriosis. So in Australia, that government did have consultation with the endometriosis community as they developed their plan. And we think that's absolutely vital to any government work on this issue. It's one of our core values as a team of volunteers that people with endometriosis are experts in their experience of the healthcare system, and integrating that learning and that expertise is one way to make sure that the solutions that government brings forward actually work for people with endometriosis in Canada. Okay, I feel like I just talked for a really long time, but to summarize, why are we asking for a national action plan on endometriosis? It's because we want a change that can benefit everyone in Canada, that helps the provinces take the action that they need to take, that is a clear and tangible step forward, and that integrates and acknowledges the expertise of people with endometriosis. So that's it for me for now. I'm going to turn it over to Emily, who's going to walk us through what's actually in this toolkit, and then I'll be back for the Q&A. Over to you, Em.
Great. Thanks so much, Kate. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all having a flare-free evening wherever you are in Canada. So as Kate mentioned, we have this great initiative for a national action plan in Canada for endo, but you may be wondering, how can we make this happen? What are the tangible steps that need to take place in order for us to see this in Canada? And that's a great question to ask. And we're here to kind of streamline the process and make it very, very approachable for everyone in Canada. So I believe that, starting political advocacy starts with raising awareness with your local member of parliament. We say this because members of parliament benefit the community because they're the ones that understand the political institution. They're the ones that can navigate the system on our behalf and can raise our voices so that we're heard in parliament by someone that understands the system. So in my day-to-day job, I see the benefit that public campaigns bring to parliament. Those that bring awareness to an issue have a very high success rate of gaining traction and support in parliament if there is a large base of support to change that issue. So for instance, we can kind of think of it as one individual walks into a member of parliament's office with an issue, and that's an amazing thing. But if we have 100 people walking into that same MP's office with the same issue, one, it's going to be very crowded for that member of parliament in their office. And two, it's going to be a red flag for that MP to act because it impacts more than just one person in their riding. So with this political advocacy push, it needs to include the voices of those directly impacted by endo. We want the policies to work for those that are directly impacted by the issue. So if we don't include the voices of those directly impacted, we run the risk of excluding regional representation with endo, BIPOC community experiences, rural, remote, and northern community experiences, as well as those with diverse endo. So those with thoracic endometriosis may have a different experience than those with different representations of endo. So we want the policies to work for everyone across Canada, so your voice needs to be heard in that advocacy push. However, in the same vein, as an endo patient myself, I know that there is a lot of pressure and advocacy on our own shoulders to gain support and resources. So it can't solely fall on the endo community to put this advocacy push forward. It needs to include friends, family members, healthcare providers, researchers, clinicians, doctors, and other allies. Again, the larger the base of support, the higher rate of traction for change. So we have created a set of tools that can really help streamline the process, and we'll do the next slide here to talk about what those look like. So the Act on Endo Toolkit, the exciting piece of this webinar. So starting tomorrow, we'll have the website updated, and there will be a tab at the top that will have action. Under that action tab will be the tools and templates that you can refer to really help make you comfortable and make this process very approachable. I understand that political advocacy can be very daunting. I remember when I first started working, it was very daunting at first, so I understand that. So we've created a lot of tools and templates that can be used that can really suit your political advocacy comfort bubble, I'll say. So the three main parts we'll talk about are how to find your MP. So who should I actually be reaching out to? A template email and letter that have been curated already. You just have to include certain experiences that really relate to you. An MP tracking list. So who have we met with already? Who have we contacted? And this can really help streamline the monitoring process and steps for our advocacy initiative, as well as supportive documents and tools. So if you want to use a social media post, we have those for you. If you want to see a guide to a successful meeting, so what should I expect before, during, and after a meeting? We have that as well. And if your political advocacy is extending to a virtual meeting with a member of parliament, we also have meeting material that has been drafted and ready for you to use to really help streamline that meeting and make it comfortable. All of these tools and templates are bilingual. They're all translated to suit your preferred language of choice. So we'll jump into the first one. On the next slide, please. Perfect. So on this slide, there'll be two pictures that will come up. So the steps on the toolkit starting tomorrow will have steps to find who your local member of parliament is. Now you may be wondering, Emily, we just had a federal election. I know who my MP is. And that's a great thing. I think it's a good thing to know who your MP is. But what I will say is that sometimes throughout the parliamentary session, MPs can change. Sometimes they step down and there's by-elections that are called. So we just want to have the steps in place that can really confirm who you're meeting with and who you're sending out this advocacy tools and templates to. So if you could just click one more, Natasha, there'll be another photo that comes up here. It'll be steps to find this page. It's the Parliament of Canada website. Now, there's a search bar at the bottom, and you can include, if you know your MP already or your postal code, it will lead you to the other image on the right-hand side, which will be a profile of your member of Parliament. So we've used the Honorable Chrystia Freeland as an example. She's currently the Deputy Prime Minister, as well as the Minister of Finance, a busy lady. So lots going on her plate, but you'll see in her bio that you'll have her political affiliation. So what party is she a part of? Her language of choice, her riding, or other known as constituency, as well as contact details. And these are the main things that you can refer to. So you can find her email, her phone number, and her address, mailing address for both the Hill office in Ottawa, as well as the constituency office, which is probably down the street from where you are right now for your certain MP, not Chrystia Freeland, but whoever your MP is. When it comes to mailing, if you want to send a physical letter to your member of Parliament with the templates that we have, there's no right or wrong office to reach out to. I find that both are very, successful in my approach to both. But if you do want to have a personalized connection to that MP because you're from the riding and you want to make that deeper connection, I suggest kind of starting with the constituency office for the mailing address. And if you do decide to do that, all postage is free if you're mailing a physical letter to your member of Parliament. So if that's kind of holding you back from sending a letter, just a word of advice that it's free. There's no postage with that. And if you're curious on email or phone, whatever one's best, I find if you want a direct contact point, email and phone is best to kind of set the stage for a meeting to be developed. But if you're okay to just send the letter physically, that's more than fine too. We're going to go to the next slide here. Okay, so template, email, and letter. We're going to go in the next couple of slides after this one, but we're going to go step by step of what the actual template letter looks like, just for transparency purposes. But I know how hard it can be to sit down and say, okay, how am I going to start writing this letter? What should I say? What should be included so I can really make an impact on what I want to say to a politician? And we've done the work for you, okay? We've set in stone what can kind of be the flow of the letter. And again, it's completely customizable to suit your needs. So if there's something in the letter that you're not quite comfortable talking on, please feel free to remove it. And there's a section too that can talk about your personal experience or connection to endo. Again, if you're a researcher, what is the research coming down with endo? If you're a doctor, what is the connection that you see with patients coming through? And again, if you live with endo, this is a perfect opportunity to talk about that experience. So the letter demands a Canadian National Action Plan for endo in consultation with the endo community. It would not make any sense for a policy to be developed without first consulting those directly impacted by the issue. And the government knows this. The federal government right now is very good about having public consultations, meaning that before a policy is created or a national action plan is created, they go back to the community and say, what are we missing here? What are some gaps that we should really address in this policy? And it extends beyond the endo community to researchers and doctors and friends and family that they kind of collaborate with to really hone and create that solid piece of policy that's pushed forward to the public. So the federal government knows this and they're good at this. And we know that we want this to happen. So we just reiterate that in the letter that that's something that needs to occur. Again, it does not have Endo Act branding on the email or the template letter. So you can use this to speak on your own behalf and to your own needs as well. We recommend keeping the letter to 2 pages maximum. I find that that is more a suitable length for reaching out to your member of parliament. Like Kate has mentioned, they are very busy. They're human like all of us, and they have a lot on their plate right now with the political atmosphere that we're in. So if you do have a connection to endo as a patient, I know how difficult it can be to kind of shorten your story because there's so many nuanced details to it. I know I can speak for hours about my own, but kind of keep it in the letter to a paragraph and a half if you can, and if you're comfortable doing that. Because I find if you do feel comfortable meeting in virtual meetings, that's time where you can really delve into more detail about your experience. So we're going to jump to the template letter now, just for transparency. So when you go to the template letter on our website starting tomorrow, this will be the first section that you see. It'll have Dear, and you put the MP's name in, as well as what endometriosis is the connection to you. So endo is an important issue to me because, you know, my daughter has endometriosis and I really want this to be fixed, or I'm a doctor, researcher. Again, put your experience here and really make that a personalized approach to the letter. The next section you'll see is how many are impacted by endometriosis around the world, as well as in Canada. So 1 in 10 women of reproductive age and an unknown number of gender diverse people. Again, if you want to state your own pronouns here, this is a good option to do that as well. The next section you'll see is the length of time for diagnosis. And we've highlighted this to change to suit your specific story. So for myself, it was more than 11 years. So if I was taking this template, I would change that number to suit my own personalized story. But again, you can put 5 to 11 years based on that scientific research that we've conducted on our end. The next section you'll see is, once diagnosed, the length of time to receive surgical care and chronic pain care in Canada. Now, this is before the pandemic, I want to say, so it might change. So wait times 9 months to 2 years for specialized surgical care. Again, if that's been more for you or less, speak to that experience, because those nuanced details, again, will really help hone this policy to be really effective. The next thing you'll see is the part that connects it to the government. So the annual cost of endometriosis in Canada is $1.8 billion. The federal government wants to know, why should I care about this issue? And we're providing a win-win for them, because we're saying, if you're acting on this issue and creating a goal to create change, it's going to actually help the economy. So we kind of put a win-win in there, so the government recognizes that it's not just an issue that's impacting the community, it's impacting their pocketbooks as well. Okay, so the next slide will be the second half of the letter. And we want to really hone in on the detail that the federal government, we know they're not responsible for healthcare delivery, because they might be reading the letter saying, this is a healthcare issue that I can't solve. But we want to really stress and hone in on the detail that it's an opportunity to really address that substantial burden and cost to endometriosis in Canada, and that they do have a role to play with support and funding and health promotion for the community. Again, as Kate has mentioned, we include the hyperlink to the National Action Plan for Endo that's been placed in Australia, because again, I feel like the government is very busy. So we're coming with them, I should say, with a template. Like, here you go. Here's the work has already kind of been done. Just apply it to the Canadian context to really make it work for the Canadian community. So we've kind of provided that solution for them. The work has kind of already been done, which is nice. And then the 2 following sections, you'll see a portion where you can ask to meet or set up a virtual meeting. Again, please feel free to take out this section if your political advocacy bubble is not quite at meeting in a virtual meeting setting. I understand, again, it can be very daunting. So just remove that section. But if you still want someone to meet with that member of parliament, we've included Endo Act Canada's information. So their email and phone number we'll provide as well, if they want to set up that meeting on our end and kind of do a follow-up with that person. You can also use another endometriosis advocacy group that would potentially like to meet with that MP instead of Endo Act Canada. Again, just kind of double check with that community that they're okay to meet on that behalf. And then finally, in the letter, we end with a question and a call to action. And it kind of really puts I like to say, like a little tic tac in the back of the MP's brain to say, what am I actually going to do here? How am I going to act on this? And we say, can we count on you to champion the development of an action plan for endo that ensures we receive the right care in the right place at the right time? And I think if you're coming from the writing and you include your postal code, it really does drive home the need that I'm a constituent of yours. You're the voice for me in the House of Commons, and I'm counting on you. I'm really counting on you to really push this forward, and I'm in need here. So it kind of just drives that forward. So happy to answer more questions about this. If you have them, just pop them in the Slido box and we'll answer them at the end of the webinar here. But we'll move on to the next section, which is the MP tracking list. So you've found your MP, you've reached out to them, you've had a meeting. That's amazing. And congratulations. It's a big step. So we have an MP tracking list on the website. It's an Excel spreadsheet. And this is really effective for political advocacy because we want to know how we're doing. We want to know who's been contacted and how it went and what was the feedback given from that member of parliament. So you'll see an Excel sheet here. On the first couple of columns, you'll see the first and last name and constituency, which is just another term for the riding or the city that the MP represents. You can filter it based on who your MP is, and then the province or territory that they're from. In the next column, you'll see contacted. So a box, and you can just check it. And so that we know on our end that that MP has been fully contacted. It doesn't necessarily mean that they responded. And I want to make that clear. If you contacted them with a social media graphic or a tweet or an actual meeting, just check it, even if they haven't responded, just so we know on our end. The next column you'll see is by how many people. So again, if I contacted Chrystia Freeland and I, sent her a social media graphic on Twitter, I've contacted her and I'll put a 1 in that column. If you've also done the same, we're really doing well with our advocacy. So you can just put a 2. So we'll just kind of keep the tally going so that we know, hey, like the Honorable Chrystia Freeland, there's been 10 people that have reached out and we haven't really had a response. And that's going to kind of flag us to kind of push forward on advocacy in that realm. And then the final section you'll see is anything you want to share. So for us, I like to say if there's any photos that you took, like a screenshot of during a virtual meeting, if there is a response from that member of parliament, either a tweet or a like, something to just note. And again, negative feedback. So sometimes that does happen when you go into a meeting. Sometimes they say, I have no control over this issue, I'm not interested. That may happen. And that's something to really keep in mind so that we can keep tabs of who our supporters are in the House of Commons to really push for change. Next slide, please. Social media posts, very exciting. These are some new graphics coming out from Endo Act Canada, but you'll see that there are no Endo Act Canada branding on it. So again, completely customizable to suit your preference of what you want to use. These social media posts are great to use on any social media platform. So again, if you're not really at the stage of meeting virtually with an MP or writing a letter, social media graphics are a great advocacy initiative to really push for that national action plan. Again, political advocacy looks different for everybody. It doesn't mean you have to send a letter and do all these things. You can just send a new graphic and that's more than enough in our books. We have these 4 graphics as well as 7 sets of Twitter length texts that you can incorporate with the graphic. So again, if you're not quite sure what to say with the graphic, we have those tools and templates to kind of help make the flow of the social media graphic work for you. Next slide, please. Okay, guide to a successful meeting. Now, when I first started working as a federal lobbyist, again, I didn't know what to expect in a meeting. I was very anxious typing in that 613 number to really connect with a member of parliament. So I can understand that you may not know if it's the first time advocating with a politician, what to expect. And that's completely normal. So I've had this list over 5 years and it's been curated for volunteers with my day-to-day work. But it kind of sets the tone of what you can expect and how you can prepare for a meeting with a politician. So for instance, making connections with their staff. Oftentimes they hold the calendar invitation or they're the first ones to the phone. So making that connection is something to kind of be prepared for. What to expect during a meeting. So is an MP going to be late or early most of the times? Well, that's something that we can answer. And sometimes they do run late because there's votes in the House or they're part of a committee. So just things to expect and not to take personally, because sometimes I was like, I'm a very early bird, I'm here, I'm ready, and then they would be late. So just don't take it personally. So again, that's going to be reflected in the successful guide meeting trick template, and then follow-up tips and tricks. So if you want to keep that relationship going with an MP, how can you professionally do that? And we kind of have steps there to hone that streamlined process. Next slide, please. And then finally, I know there's lots here, but we're really trying to push the political advocacy aside from just sending a template letter. So if you take on a virtual meeting and you're at that stage where you really want to take that on, there's a set of slides that are a presentation that have been curated to really streamline that meeting. So if you want to sit down and say, okay, I really want to prepare for this meeting, but I don't know where to start, we've created that for you. So a first slide is your connection to endo, and that will be really the only slide that would need some tweaking and some tailoring to suit your story and experience. A description of endo will be the next slide. So again, it will just look like a PowerPoint presentation, and you can click through it virtually, or you can send it ahead of time or after the meeting. So again, description of endo, current status of care in Canada, consequences of inadequate care in Canada, as well as the recommendations for action. So that's the slide you see there. And it's just 3 bullet points that outline what we're asking the federal government to take on our behalf, as well as references. We always want to come with scientific citations. We don't want to come out saying, this is true and not have that reference. So those are included in the deck as well. Again, these are translated to suit your preferred language of choice. And again, you don't have to use this template at all in a meeting. If you say, okay, I know how I want to set this up, I just want to talk about my endo experience and then call for a national action plan, that's more than enough too. Again, these templates are here just to support you if you really want to have that streamlined approach to a meeting. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, call to action. We're doing it. It's happening. So Toolkit goes live tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern time at endoact.ca/toolkit or /toolkit/. You can write to your MP. Again, anyone can use the template. It's for endo community, those outside of it, everyone. The larger base of support, the higher rate of traction. Share the toolkit in your network. So colleagues, if you're comfortable, friends, family, again, we really want that base of support there. And then keep us in the loop. If there's any questions you have or hesitations, we're here to support you because again, EndoAct is doing the same thing on our end. We're meeting, we're pushing that advocacy for this national action plan to be in place because it's time. It's really time for Canada to have this national action plan, and we're really here to support, and we're part of a team. So we're in it together, and I don't want you to feel alone in this at all. So we're here to help with that resource. So very exciting, and I'm going to pass it to Natasha now for questions.
Hey, thank you so much to both of you. The questions here, we have quite a few and they look really great. So I'm going to pass it back to Kate, who's going to read off the first question here.
Awesome. Thank you, Natasha. I just need to take a moment to say, Emily, you're incredible. I mean, we've worked together so hard on this, but to hear you speak through the whole thing, I feel so much gratitude to have your expertise on the team. And sorry, I was just looking down because that's where your face is on my screen. So let me move you up. All right, so let's get into these questions and answers. I'll take a stab at the first one, which is what type of care is being pushed for? Is there a push for change for more OR time or surgical time for minimally invasive gynecologic surgeons? Is there a push for proper treatment of endo, not just symptom management? Is there a push for that MIGs to be their own subspecialty? Great question. So the national action plan that we're pushing for, what we really want is we want the government to take responsibility for going out to the community and learning what that community needs. So I can sit here and say that in my vision of a national action plan, absolutely, shorter wait for surgical care by an appropriate surgeon is part of that. But really what we want is for the government to do that consultation and to hear from folks in the community about what it is that they need and where they need it. So the national action plan maybe is a step up from making specific demands about care and just saying there's a massive need, there's a massive gap, you need to go out and take the resources of the government and solve this, right? Like if the Minister of Health calls the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists or the Canadian Society for the Advancement of Gynecologic Excellence, which is kind of the two homes of OBGYNs in Canada, and says, we hear there's this huge endometriosis problem and we want to have a meeting with you or meetings with you to sort this out, they're going to answer and they're going to be at those meetings, is my sense. Emily, is that right?
Yes.
One word answer. Yes. Great. Okay. So Natasha, if we could check off that question. Awesome. Next question. Do we have any experts, doctors, OBGYNs, surgeons, et cetera, on board? Yes. The answer is yes. the Canadian Society for the Advancement of Gynecologic Excellence is the professional home for many of the surgeons in Canada who do minimally invasive gynecologic surgery, and they've been involved with EndoAct's work from the very beginning. So they are involved. And I also just want to highlight that we also have community experts involved in our work. EndoAct is majority people with lived experience of endometriosis. And for us, they're the real experts too. We need to know what's happening for people in community who are getting care. And we need to make sure that any solutions that we're moving forward reflect those needs. So a really lovely blend of people involved in the work. Thanks for that question. Okay, next question. In comparison to Australia's action plan and now France, those countries haven't created large benefit for patients in obtaining care. Australians are still leaving the country for care. How will Canada be any different? Yeah, I really appreciate this question. Thank you. Because it's true. It's one thing to say we have this grand plan to solve endometriosis, and it's another thing to put that plan into action. So I think we're lucky in a way that we're coming after Australia and France because we can learn from those communities and those countries about what their challenges have been, right? So we talked at the beginning about how the Australian plan didn't really have like a clear timeline or indicators. So now we know in our national action plan, we want a clear timeline. We want indicators for how we're making progress. So I think I see that as a learning opportunity for us. I don't know, Emily, if there's anything you want to add.
I'll also say too, policies are fluid and they're cyclical. So what that means is that they don't just stop at, okay, a policy's been created and that's it. Like we don't have to touch it anymore. And I think that's sometimes what's forgotten. So every year that comes around, once this national action plan is developed, there needs to be a reevaluation on the community side as well as the political side to make sure that it's still working for those that live with endometriosis in Canada. And I think too, having the voices of those directly impacted by endometriosis will really make that policy strong. And the more research that comes out will again make that policy very strong. So we hope to be different in the sense that we're going to continue that traction. It's not just going to stop at, okay, we have a national action plan. It needs to always be monitored and looked at and curated to ensure that those after us, generations after us, that hopefully have care sooner than 11 years are being taken care of. So that's what I would say as well.
All right, Emily, as our resident policy expert, I think this is a good one for you. How will we know if the campaign is actually working?
It's a great question. And, you know, in the political realm, sometimes it's really hard to see changes made because the hard truth is that policy development takes time and it can be fast if we have, again, that larger base of traction to support that change. But there are ways in which we can see and kind of track changes happening before a national action plan is actually put in place. So for instance, if it's brought up in the House of Commons, that's one way we can kind of see the campaigns working. If we receive support from a member of parliament, if they continue to be a champion in the House, we see this in Ontario with a recent MPP that's spoken on endometriosis. MPP Styles, I believe is the correct pronunciation. I could be wrong there, but a champion in the House of Commons to really support our initiatives. There's also the Senate. So that's another opportunity in the future that we can go and connect to the policy after it goes to the House of Commons. There is committee work. So has a committee opened up a study about endometriosis in Canada? That's another way to really see if traction is happening on it. And again, if there's other nuances, reports being out, media coverage. So again, has someone created an opinion piece that's putting pressure on the government, which is something that, you know, I might do on my own end here just to make some traction on the media side, but raising awareness outside of Parliament Hill to really push that need. There's different ways to see if the campaign is working. And again, if the campaign worked, we have a national action plan. That's the end goal, not end goal, but I guess the first step in creating that awareness and support where we need it. And so, yeah, definitely lots of nuanced areas where we can see and track if the campaign is working for sure. The next question, are any of you available to help or be part of meetings with local MPs? So great question, definitely. So EndoAct Canada is here to support where we need. You know, in my current role, I can pick, the Federal Lobbying Act has certain regulations on lobbyists. So depending on the topic and choice and MP that I'm dealing with, I can sit on and kind of help and support in certain ways. But I'm sure that there are other volunteers and experts that can really help really make you feel comfortable going to a meeting, but always here to help answer questions and make you feel comfortable with that approach, because it can be very daunting. So yes, we are here to help support in any way that you see fit, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, taking a look at this next question here. Does EndoAct have a specific action plan they are asking for, or specific guidelines, or is the lobbying just to ask for a national action plan to be developed? The ask is for the government to develop a national action plan. EndoAct is in a small, mighty group of volunteers with a lot of passion for this project, but we don't have the capacity to develop an action plan. And that's really not the role of us as the public. It's the government's job to develop policy and develop this action plan, but we see our role as getting it on the agenda, making sure that it's a priority for people with the power to make change. And then we want the government to use its resources to come to the community and say, we hear there's a huge issue with care. Please tell us about that. What are the solutions that can help you? What are the systems that are already in place? What works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing. But we feel very reluctant about stepping forward and saying, here you go, government, we have this thing already wrapped up in a bow for you. That's not how our vision of success is for that plan to be developed by the government with the wider endometriosis community in Canada. Any additions?
No, that's great. Yeah, just again reiterating, it's a template that has been created for other countries for sure, but it needs to apply to the Canadian context for sure. And the government, that's their responsibility, and we're going to put pressure on that for sure.
Right. Yeah. So as an example, of particular Canadian challenges, we live in a huge country, right? And access to care is really different if you live in a rural, remote, or northern community than if you live in an urban center. There's a lot of little important pieces of the puzzle that really require the weight of government to sort out properly so that everyone is getting the right care in the right place at the right time. So that's what we'd like for them to do with the endometriosis community. Let's see. Is there any action plan for private donations? I'm not sure if I understand this question, Emily or Natasha.
I guess so. Action plan for private donations to support the development of a national action plan potentially, or private donations for media relations. I feel like on our end, there's no action plan to reach out for private donors at this time. But maybe something down the future. I'm not quite sure, Kate, if I'm speaking on behalf of EndoAct Canada on this, but yeah, on our end, not with this initiative, from my understanding.
Yeah, if the question is about supporting the work that EndoAct does, we don't currently accept donations. Our main source of power is volunteers, and we have been lucky to receive some funding from the UBC Community University Engagement Office. They help us do some of our work. If we're not answering the question, please just feel free to pop it, a clarifying question into Slido, and we'll take another crack at it. Sorry, I'm not sure if we're answering exactly there, but let's move on for now, and please feel free to re-ask if we didn't answer the question. Is it better to contact my MP by email or on social media? Are they more likely to respond if I use a certain method? So I'll go first and I'll go quickly, and then I'll turn it over to Emily. My sense is that if you're going to do one thing for advocacy, the thing to do is write an email versus social media, but I will turn it over to Emily and she can fact check me on that.
So it kind of depends on, again, your comfort level, and I would say what your end goal is. So if you just want to have that contact point immediately and say, I want a national action plan and raise awareness, Social media is a great way to do that. And what I'll say is MPs love the little blue bird. They love Twitter. So I would highly recommend using Twitter as an option to reach out to an MP and tag them. So an at MP whoever. You can also use hashtags like Canadian Poly or Canada Politics, things like that, as well as the Act on Endo Toolkit. But if you would like to set up a meeting, so a virtual meeting, I would say that emails are preferred because that hits the staff and the office itself instead of a social media where it could be just a staffer that's working on the social media side of things and not necessarily working with the calendar of the MP. So just depends on what your outreach would look like and what you feel comfortable doing for sure. Next question, what should I do if I email my MP and don't hear back? Well, this is something that can happen. MPs, again, are busy. And I would say right now, they're coming back to the House of Commons from holiday break Monday. So we have a little bit of time. And if you send an email the next couple of days, it will be in their inbox on Monday. So that's a kind of good time to start sending things. MPs they're kind of going back to their ridings on like potentially Thursday nights and Fridays. So a good time to reach out are Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I find. If you don't hear back from your MP, again, this can happen. I would recommend waiting at least a week or a little bit of time before sending another email. However, if you want to put that pressure on them, quick phone call. You can connect with the staff and say, where's some time in their schedule where I want to hear from the MP to set up a meeting? And I find phone call is best if you really want to push that meeting forward. So yeah, definitely an option there. Next question is, if I contact the MP, how soon after I contact them should my support group, my spouse, family, friends, etc., contact them? They can contact them at the exact same time as you. However, if you want to set the tone, again, I would recommend waiting a couple of days and just say, listen, my partner, my friend, whoever it may be, has sent a letter and hasn't really heard from you. I really want them to meet, or what are you doing about this? So yeah, a couple of days before you have your group kind of support, but again, they can send it at the same time. Again, the larger the base of support, the higher rate of traction. So if your MP is getting all of these letters all at once, they might say, oh, this is like an issue that really needs to be solved. And again, if you're not hearing from them, a phone call is number one, I would say. And sometimes phone calls can be daunting. I get that. So, but you'll hit the staff member first. The MP will rarely pick up the phone. I've had one instance where the MP themselves picks them up. So you'll hit the staffer first, and they're very friendly. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. Next question, what happens if we just get a constituency assistant responding? So yeah, that might happen too. So sometimes even myself, I'll send an email for my client and we'll get a response back from a policy advisor or a staff member themselves. That's fine if they set up the meeting. So I'm happy to speak with a constituency assistant. Sometimes they'll say, I can sit on the meeting on behalf of the member of parliament. And in that instance, I would take it. I would say it's better than nothing. And the constituency assistant or the staffer will often pass information up. So I would really say if anyone from the office is willing to meet, I would take that meeting for sure. Anytime that you can spread awareness around this issue is a positive advocacy push in our books for sure. Next question here. Is it better to write my MP a letter or send an email? So again, up to you. I would say if you want an instant response and know that your information was received, email all the way. But if you feel more comfortable sending that physical letter, again, there's no charge to send that to the office. And I find that the MPs read it, yes, but sometimes you may not receive a response back with the letters. So something to keep in mind. I would say email is probably best. I don't want to tell my whole story to my MP. Is that okay? Absolutely. I want to stress this. You don't have to share your story and your experience if you are not comfortable with that. I know we have our own comfort levels when it comes to sharing details. And again, it's hard to relive that trauma. And I know for myself, like medical gaslighting for experience, like I don't want to go through that sometimes. And that's completely okay. You can just say the statistics in the letter that we have that are supported by that information and research of it usually takes, a certain amount of time for diagnosis, certain amount of time for specialized care. And we really need a national action plan for endo. Completely okay. It's totally your comfort zone and what you're comfortable sharing. Next one. Sorry, Kate, if you wanted to jump into, I feel like I'm dominating these questions here.
You're our expert, please. Like I'm learning so much. Keep on trucking.
Oh, sorry. I think there was one. Will you be contacting the media about the campaign? How can we get media attention for this? I think that's a really great question. I think if we share social media graphics that we have or your own with any media outlets that you have, whether that be municipal, federal, whatever it may be, or local newsletters or media coverage, that's an amazing way to spread awareness. For ourselves, we're looking at, potential down the line of opinion pieces in the newsletters or news, as well as gaining traction media wise. But Kate, I don't know if you have more to say on that from the Endo Act Canada side.
Yeah, so the media is a great way to raise awareness. One of my first and limited learnings in policy work was if you can get something in the Globe and Mail, that's the paper that federal elected officials are really likely to see. So we know that media makes a big difference. Like Emily said, we're going to be doing some pushing, like our members are going to push for some coverage, especially during March, Endometriosis Awareness Month. There's often, reporters who are looking to write about endometriosis. They should be looking to write about it every month of the year, but March is the year when it tends to happen. So I think that'll be happening. And what I would really, really encourage anyone listening who likes to write and feels comfortable writing about their experience and perspectives to do is to write like a letter to the editor in your local paper. Because when we think about people in this country, more people read their local news than national news. So that's a really great way to make an impact in your local community and say, like, this is a problem, no one knows about it. And I'm so sure that a really strong local network of advocates can form around that, because it's important for people to be seen and to see their experience in the news. So if that's something that you have the bandwidth for, I think that would be a really wonderful thing to do. And of course, if you're doing interviews or writing, we welcome, and we would be so grateful if you could mention the Act on Endo Toolkit and campaign, just so other people with endometriosis and their allies can be connected to the toolkit through your work. I'll leave it there. Let's see. Ooh, I like this question. I'll read it and Emily can answer it. If my MP is the Prime Minister, would you suggest any other strategies to take into account when contacting him?
Very great question. If you're from Papineau, Quebec, I would say that so Justin Trudeau has technically 3 offices. He has his Prime Minister's office, he has his ministerial office, and he has his riding office. I would suggest reaching directly to the riding office if you're a constituent from that riding. I feel like that really hits home that, yes, you're the Prime Minister, but you also have a responsibility to be the voice for myself from Papineau in the House of Commons. So definitely reach out to the riding first. I would also suggest, if you're from Papineau itself, I would recommend reaching out to a surrounding region or riding and connecting with that MP as well. That can be really beneficial as well, because they're often aware of the issues that are surrounding that region or that area of the province. So you can definitely reach out to the surrounding constituencies and just say, hey, like, as you know, this is an issue that impacts our community. It extends into your riding as well, and then kind of go from there as another strategy you could use. But definitely riding or constituency office, another term for that, and or the surrounding ridings for that. Hopefully that helps. Let us know how it goes. What do you think is the most important implementation of support from the government right now? Funds, media? Yeah, Kate, I'll let you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think when it boils down to it, a lot of the challenges that the endometriosis community faces do require funding to solve them. So let's take just general public awareness as an example. Like, we need people with the power to do so to flow some funding into campaigns and initiatives to address that issue. The same thing with organizing care. We need funding to make sure that appropriate care is supported. So I think it's always good to attach a price tag to an ask. That being said, there are things that the government can do that cost nothing that could have a huge impact. So when the French president got on his whatever social media platform it was and said the words endometriosis and talked about endometriosis for a significant period of time, like imagine Justin Trudeau did that, how awareness of the disease would shift. Now, that's not a solution to care in Canada, but it is a massive step forward in people knowing and caring about the condition. So I really think there's a spectrum, but a national action plan, like we talked about at the beginning, needs to have funding attached to it so that we can actually enact solutions. That would be my answer to that question. Emily, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
No, I think that was great. Yeah, that was really thorough.
All right. So the next question, can I share that I met with my MP on social media? Do I need their permission to share? Is it okay to share how it went? So Emily, I'll maybe let you take a first stab.
Yeah, so I highly recommend sharing on social media if you met with them. Oftentimes in the meetings, we usually say, it's okay to take a screenshot of this or a quick photo, just to say, we met with you. And oftentimes they really want that clout, I'll say, like they want to show the public that they're meeting with constituents about issues that matter. So more often than not, they're very open to having those photos and permission to share. But if you feel more comfortable asking for that, that's definitely okay too. And then share how it went. Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes with our organization that I work with, we say, great discussion about, infrastructure, whatever it may be, with MP, whoever, really look forward to future chats or discussions around this topic in the future. If it went negatively, it's up to you. Again, that might be a bridge that's burned with the MP. So just something to keep in mind. But again, something to note, if they're not supportive, it might be, it might be interesting to put a negative spin on it, but I would just say really needed support with the National Call for Action Plan for Endometriosis and looking for more concrete support in the future or something like that. But again, you just want to watch your relationships with MPs because you want to make sure that relationship is pushed forward. But again, if they're not supportive, then that's maybe a bridge already burned. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I would just add that in the toolkit, there is that MP tracking sheet. So if you have a good or bad experience, you can put in the comments how it went. And to just reiterate something that Emily said earlier, if you're feeling uncomfortable or unhappy with how your meeting went and you want to kind of debrief with someone about that, we're here. Shoot us an email or a message on Instagram or Facebook, and we can connect and just maybe talk through a little bit how it went and if there's any steps that we can take together moving forward. So that's what I would add there. So let's see this next question. My endo story was published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. Is there a recommended way to get that out in front of the right people? I think that's wonderful that you've shared your experience in a journal that's read by so many Canadian clinicians. It's really good to have patient experiences featured in those venues and not just research all the time. So my suggestion, and this goes for anyone who has shared their story anywhere that's publicly accessible, one thing you could do is when you copy and paste that letter template, you can link to your story and say, to hear more about my experience, you can read it here. I think it achieves a few things, right? It shows your MP that this is an important issue. It's been published elsewhere, and it makes it so that you don't have to retell that whole story that you've already shared, because like we talked about earlier, that can be really traumatizing. So for some folks, so if your story is published in a medical journal or on a blog or on a website, you can always say, to read more, here's the link to my story. I don't know, Emily, if you have any other thoughts about that question there.
No, that definitely makes sense. And yeah, definitely share in the letter, but just a reminder, if you're sending a hyperlink, that should be sent digitally. If you're sending your letter physically, just print out the story if you want and include that in the letter to the MP.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Next question, is it all available in French? Oui. It's the extent of my French. No, I know a little bit more, but it is all available in French. We have 3 tremendous volunteers who translated every single tool in the toolkit. We're so delighted. Obviously, a significant proportion of people in Canada speak French as their first language, and we want to support them in their advocacy. So everything there is available in French, and we're proud of that. Emily, do you want to take this one? Should we be contacting not only the MP, but the MPP, or I guess MLA, depending on the province that you live in?
Yeah, great question. And again, the larger the base of support, higher rate of traction. So you can definitely reach out to your member of provincial parliament or member of legislative assembly for sure, but just remove the federal aspect. So if you're using the tools and templates that we've curated, they're obviously used for the federal lens. So if you're aware of the gaps that exist in your current province and want to raise those, feel free to use the templates that we have to really suit your needs and your call to action in the province. You can definitely reach out to your MPP if you know who they are, for sure.
Yeah, so I think maybe just to clarify the pieces of the letter that are national, it's basically that second half of the letter that talks about the need for a national action plan for endometriosis. Like your MPP or MLA isn't responsible as a member of provincial government for national policy. So they might not be the best ally to help move that forward. But like Emily said, you can absolutely write to them about things sort of that are in provincial responsibility. So the delivery, organization, and management of healthcare in your province, and ask them to take action on that. I think in the same way that we've been talking about, it helps to ask them to do something more specific versus more general, so they can understand it and see how they can move it forward. Next question, how does one become an active member of EndoAct for individuals? I think in terms of volunteering with EndoAct, our current focus is really doing what we're talking about today, which is building capacity at the local level for people to advocate for endometriosis by creating these kinds of tools. That being said, our team is always sort of taking different shapes and growing. So when we are recruiting new volunteers, we post that on our website and on our social media channels. So if you're interested in volunteering, thank you. And those calls do come up occasionally. But what we really want to do is help people do that advocacy where they're at in a way that's as easy as possible. Yeah. All right. Next question. How closely will EndoAct Canada guidelines follow the Australian guidelines? So just so I'm understanding the question, I think sometimes in this work we talk about a national action plan, and because we spend some time talking to clinicians, we also talk about clinical practice guidelines. So EndoAct Canada isn't preparing clinical practice guidelines, in case that's what this question is about. If it's about the difference and the similarity between the Canadian National Action Plan and the Australian one, I think that's really going to depend on what the government hears from the Canadian endometriosis community about what they want, or about what we want. So the Australian plan had kind of those 3 buckets around awareness and education, clinical care, and research. So, I mean, I think for many people, those are high priority items, but it will really depend on what the government hears from the community in consultation. I do think there's things to learn from the Australian plan, like we talked about. I think having a clear timeline and indicators for what is going to happen is something that, like, thinking for myself, kind of with my researcher hat on, and wanting to see tangible progress, I would really want in a Canadian version of the plan. All right. How long will it take to get a national action plan? Emily, am I putting you on the spot to give you this question?
No, so it depends. Again, the larger the base of support, the higher rate of traction. So if we have everyone kind of, again, outside of the endo community as well, because it takes a lot to really build this awareness. But if we can really build traction, I feel like a national action plan can take place. there are steps that happen in the political system that do take time. So again, it could take a year, year and a half, 2 years, or shorter for sure. But we just want to keep expectations at a reasonable level, because again, policy development does take time. It goes in the House of Commons and it goes through 3 readings and you know, back and forth, then it goes to, you know, committees, and then it goes to the Senate, and then back to the House. So lots of nuances there with creating policies and national action plans. But yeah, it does take time. But again, if we have that real push, and again, with media, with social media, your letters, your advocacy push, I feel like we can get some action and some traction on it for sure, sooner rather than later.
I want to ask Emily, can I ask you a follow-up question? Does it make a difference whether there's a majority or a minority government in terms of how quickly policy moves?
It does. So if you have a majority government, you do have the sway of the House, I should say. So it is easier to get the support, I should say, from the House to push bills or push legislation forward and push those initiatives to committees and stuff. There is, you know, still options for the opposition to have questions and concerns and raise those, which are good. It's good to have those different lenses on policies when they're being developed. But yeah, majority governments do, I find, have that push and support for policies to be pushed forward faster.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm adding just my own curiosity at this point. All right, next question. Oh, not a question, but a compliment. EndoAct is pretty fantastic with helping getting outreach going. Very dedicated and caring. Kudos. Thank you. That's really appreciated. Yeah, there's been just like a huge group of volunteers working to get this ready and as thoughtfully prepared and as strategically positioned as humanly possible for us. And I'm so proud of everyone who's been doing this work. So thank you. Thanks a lot for acknowledging it. That really means a lot. What's happening? What's the best way to approach my surgeon and doctors and ask them to be allies? What should they do to help? That's a really interesting question. So I think the first thing is, just so that you know, as we talked about before, we have members of the Canadian Society for Gynecologic Excellence on our team, and we're connected with that organization, and we will be calling on them to take the same steps that we're presenting here. Use the toolkit, reach out to your MP, share it in your professional networks. You know, these are folks who every day see how challenging and difficult it is for people with endometriosis in Canada to get care. And the people we work with feel really strongly about the fact that needs to change. So we're going to be reaching out to them too. But if you would like to do that on a like individual level, I think it really depends on your relationship with your surgeon or your doctor, how you communicate with them. But absolutely, please direct them to the toolkit, to the website. You can let them know that there are clinicians involved. And that it's also, you know, since everyone's busy, that it doesn't take a long time to do. And just say that I think like it would mean a lot to have their allyship in this space. I don't know, Emily, if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's key. And I think what you said there, Kate, is kind of representing that other clinicians are involved. I don't know if that's going to sway others to get involved as well. And again, we know that our healthcare workers are at the front line right now, and there is a lot of pressure and, you know, things that they're doing as well. So, and thank you if anyone on here is listening that is a healthcare provider right now during this time. I can't even imagine, and I really do, you know, think of you during this time and really care for your support, I should say. I'm losing my voice and words now, but yeah, I think if you kind of say, you know, we have other clinicians on board, but again, understanding that there is a lot going on in that community right now that we also need to be aware of on our end. So.
Yeah, I'm just going to add one more thing on that question, which is that one of the advantages of having clinicians and researchers volunteer with our team is that we hear about presentations that they're giving at like clinical conferences to their colleagues. And so another step that we can take on our end is just ask them to talk about the toolkit briefly in those presentations, so that, they have a captive audience of their colleagues, and they can say, this is something that you can do. So that's all part of the strategic thinking that we do on our end to make sure that we're really mobilizing not just people with endometriosis, but also the broader community that's affected by endo. All right, just wanted to say, great presentation, team. The action plan is a key first step, and the materials you've prepared are an incredible enabler for those suffering from endo and other advocates. Great work, Kate, Emily, and the EndoAct team. Thank you. Oh, this is so sweet. Yeah, really appreciated, like I said before. And I also, I mean, I wanted to say this later, but I'm going to say it now. We've had so many really thoughtful messages from grassroots advocates and endo advocates in the community with suggestions on feedback on how to approach this campaign. And I really appreciate that we can have that dialogue exists, that this community of advocates is open and willing to give that kind of constructive feedback and build each other up. I think this campaign is the stronger for it. Other campaigns that happen in the community are the stronger for it. And so thank you. Okay. Is the Endometriosis Network Canada part of EndoAct? No. So I'll briefly tell the backstory of EndoAct Canada. So EndoAct Canada started in 2019 when I can't remember exactly. I think Philippa Bridgecook, who's the chair of the Endometriosis Network Canada, reached out to the Centre for Pelvic Pain and Endometriosis in BC about starting some policy work, and some emails were exchanged and we were put in touch, and that's kind of how EndoAct started out. But the 10C is really focused, the Endometriosis Network Canada, is really focused on providing support to people with endo in Canada. I don't want to speak for their mission. I wish we had someone on screen with us who could do that, but you're probably aware of the support group that they run and their other great initiatives. And EndoAct is a collaboration of volunteers that work to advance policy. And we do have members who are from the Endometriosis Network as well as Endometriosis Quebec, but they're distinct groups. I think that answers that question. So yeah, EndoAct is really laser focused on change at the system level and policy change. That's the distinction. Okay. If someone has visited my MP, can I still visit them again? I think yes, but Emily, I will pass it to you.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, they meet with tons of people all the time, probably around the same issues sometimes. So you think about how, I'll just use, other chronic illnesses as an example, but there are so many individuals living with, diabetes or asthma, and there are so many people going to the federal government for change. And yes, you can definitely meet with your MP if someone's already met with them. Again, larger base of support, higher rate of traction. The next question, we can also help if we are still waiting for diagnosis. Absolutely. Yes, like your story matters and your experience matters and your road to diagnosis matters. So if you haven't yet received a formal diagnosis for endometriosis, yes, these tools and templates are for you as well. I'll pass.
So I think this is clarifying the last question that I answered. The reason I asked about the Endo Network is because they have started an advocacy group, and I thought that everyone can collaborate. I guess I can't speak to specifically what the Endometriosis Network is organizing, but what I will say is, yes, absolutely, everyone can collaborate. The toolkit that we've built out is freely, as of tomorrow, will be freely available on our website for anyone to use. And if you're an advocacy group in Canada, none of it's branded, so you can take those materials and use them for your work. And if you have any questions as you do that advocacy, by all means, reach out to us. We're happy to chat through any challenges or questions you might be having with your work. But I can't speak, I can't speak specifically to this because I'm just not aware of what the group is. All right. Do I have to ask for a meeting with my MP? No. If you don't feel comfortable asking for a meeting with your MP, you can just delete that line out of the email and just use your email or your letter as a way to make them aware of the challenge of endometriosis in Canada. And that's powerful and that's important, but certainly there's no need to be putting yourself in that position if it's something that you don't want to do or don't find yourself able to do. Oh, this is the next good question. This next one. Does it matter what party my MP represents? Should I do anything different based on their party? Emily, I'm going to flip that one to you.
It doesn't matter what party your MP represents. Should I do anything different based on their party? No. So this is a good question, because sometimes I feel like with political advocacy, we think that the government of the day or the party that's, in power has the sway of the land and can make things happen, which is true. But we also, in day-to-day work that I do, we heavily lean on the opposition, meaning Conservatives, NDP, departments as well, which is something separate from this, but the Senate, like we use other avenues to gain political traction. So opposition, oftentimes they sit on committees. So it's not just the Liberal Party right now sitting on the Health Committee in the House of Commons. It's made up of opposition members. So your MP may sit on the Health Committee, for example, and really push this through as like, okay, this needs to be a report that needs to be addressed. Opposition members also have the opportunity to do what's called a private members bill. So they can create, every parliamentary session, there's a list of those that are up for a private members bill, and they can bring forward an issue that needs to be addressed on their own behalf, on behalf of the member. So that can be another avenue that they can push for a national action plan for endo through a private members bill that is separate from the government of the day, if they're a Conservative, NDP, Green, Bloc, whatever it may be. So yeah, definitely still reach out to your MP and don't do anything different. I think, they still have sway in Parliament for sure. If we send the MP to the info@email, how do we know if the meeting happened? Great question. If you would like someone to set up the meeting on our behalf, at the Endo Act Canada side, we'll be in communication with you if the meeting happened and if you'd be willing to sit in on that as well, just to see how it goes. But again, we'll follow up with you on our end, as well as for the community. We'll always post about who we've met with, and we'll keep that traction open and transparent so that we know who's been met with, how did it go. It'll always be open and transparent on our end of the advocacy that's going on. Are there low-hanging fruit, i.e. those who have experience with and are passionate about endo? I'm assuming with parliamentarians or politicians. With this question, I don't know off the top of my head any that have spoken out federally about endometriosis. However, it doesn't mean that they don't have family members or they themselves are impacted by endometriosis and just haven't come forward about it. I think that a low-hanging fruit, I guess, or a person that's good to reach out to, again, is your local member of parliament. They're the ones that are the voice for you in the House of Commons. But if you're looking for lower fruit, I guess, is ministers. So ministers are also MPs. And so if you look at the Minister of Health, if you look at the Minister of Innovation, if you look at the Minister for Science, Research, Development, all of those different things, they have different mandates that can connect with what we're asking. So they may be, I guess, what's called a low-hanging fruit to reach out to, because they are the ones that have a mandate to act that's similar to what we're asking for, if that makes sense. So happy to share those two on socials if you're interested after. Can I put my own logo on the materials? Absolutely. Yep. I think you can speak to your own behalf and your own, your own statement and your own experience. The templates don't have Endo Act branding on it at all. So if you have your own logo or your own endometriosis advocacy group that you're part of, feel free to add that to the templates. Yeah, I would say that. Kate, I don't know if you have anything else with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were thinking about how to approach this and do the design work, we really wanted it to be a toolkit that could be used by anyone in their advocacy. So it doesn't have our logo on it. And if you want to put your logo, we tried to leave space for that in the social media graphics. And absolutely, if you're sending a letter or something, you can put it on your own letterhead. By all means, we really encourage that, and we hope people feel comfortable using those tools. And if you ever have any questions about that kind of thing, again, you can always reach out, but please feel free to brand all of this as is useful for you and your organization or your personal advocacy. Okay, next question. Is there a link between 10C and EndoAct? This is my fault. I think I didn't answer this question clearly before. So in my brief backstory of how EndoAct got started. So, well, Philippa from the Endometriosis Network personally did a lot of work to get us going. There are kind of three founding organizations or groups that came together to form EndoAct, and those are the Endometriosis Network Canada, the Canadian Society for the Advancement of Gynecologic Excellence, and then researchers at UBC. So Dr. Paul Young, myself, Natasha, we're kind of part of that cohort of people. So those are the founding organizations, and because those groups kind of built the idea of EndoAct together, we're very closely tied and we do coordinate. And as I've talked about, there's real advantages to our advocacy for that we're really grateful for. So for example, I think I mentioned before that we were lucky to receive funding from the UBC Community University Engagement Support Fund. It's a mouthful, but I think I got it right. And we were able to do that with the Endometriosis Network as our community partner. Similarly, we're holding this meeting right now on UBC Zoom that I have access to as a student. So we're really lucky that we also get to access, the resources of a university in our work. And we acknowledge that's a real privilege. That's not something that every advocacy group has access to. So we're really lucky to have that. And similarly, having a connection to the Canadian Society for Advancement of Gynecologic Excellence, CanSAGE, I'm not going to say it all again, allows us to learn and exchange knowledge with some of the leaders in care in Canada, which is really wonderful. So thanks for that question. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to clarify.
We just have a couple more minutes here and we have 4 more questions. So hopefully we can quickly get through the last 4 questions.
All right, we're going to go fast. Can we use the EndoAct logo and branding? So I think if you're representing your own experience, our preference would be that you don't use EndoAct logo and branding because we won't know what you've said and how to, and how to answer to that if it comes back to us. That sounds negative. It's because I'm answering quickly, but I guess it's hard to answer this question without knowing like specifically why you would do that. So for the person who asked this question, feel free to email us or DM us and we can work it out. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there just for the sake of speed. Do I have to use the tracking document? Absolutely not. It would be great if you did. Again, we want to keep track of how many MPs we've reached with our advocacy, but if you don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, there is no pressure. Do I actually have to show slides? Oh, I think this is a question because the background materials for the MP meetings are presented as slides. No, you don't have to get up and do a presentation. I really don't like public speaking. I would never put someone in the position where they feel like they have to get up and click through slides. I think, and Emily can maybe jump in quickly on this, you can just send the file before the meeting or after. It's really for them to have like a physical thing that they can refer to for the key facts and figures. Emily, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The slides are only there if you just want to have a step-by-step guide to help with the meeting, because sometimes it can be daunting, but you can send the slides, you cannot send the slides, you don't have to use them at all. They're there for you to use at your purview. So yeah, don't have to use them.
All right. Last question. In addition to the $1.8 billion total, is there content and text around the human and financial toll on people and the government relating to infertility in a province, a country? Yes, I'm certain that there is a lot of research about this. I don't know about infertility in general versus specifically for endo, but it's an important topic. There's been a lot of work done on this, so there's definitely that information available. I think if you look at the EndoAct Canada storytelling page, you'll see people's experiences with infertility that they've shared, and that really captures the human and financial toll of infertility. I know we're like starting to run out of time, but one thing I would say to the person who asked this question is look up online the federal health mandate letter. It contains a commitment to help ease the cost of treatment for infertility in Canada. And having something in a federal mandate letter is a really important step towards getting a policy done. So I hope reading that can give you some hope around this, because it is a really expensive and hard process to go through. So hopefully we'll see some action on that. So look up, federal mandate letter for health, and you'll see it. And if not, again, send us an email and we can send it your way. All right. Thanks for keeping us on track, Natasha. We're almost at the end, but what I really want to do is go through some thank yous. I've said this before. It's just been like a Herculean effort to get this toolkit ready to go. And I want to take some time to thank the people who made that happen. So forgive me, but I'm going to start in the top left corner and I'm going to work my way through. So Aditi is the person in the top left corner. She's our communications team lead, and she's taught us so much about communications, like comms skills, and she translates all of our social media posts into French. Next to her is Lan. You may have interacted with Lan. If you ever send us messages on social media, she's often the person who responds. Maria and Kathleen read all of the stories that you submit on our storytelling platform and post them to the website in English and French. Michelle is our East Coast endometriosis guru. Lindsay brings policy and communications expertise, and Anime does grassroots political work. Emily, you know at this point, she's our advocacy team lead and the powerhouse who has brought you the toolkit. Denise is part of our advocacy team too, and makes sure that the voices and stories of people with endometriosis are really at the center of everything that we do. Lauren comes to the team with both healthcare expertise and lived experience as someone with endometriosis. And Rosie is our Gen Z expert and the reason we may one day be on TikTok. I've lost my place in the photos now. Alicia's a surgeon who helps connect us with other physician allies. And Rena's not only a poet, but also an advocate who worked on the background materials that are part of the toolkit. Next, in the bottom left is Marie-Josée, without whom we'd be absolutely, totally lost, because she translated everything in the toolkit to French with the help of her colleague Julie, who you see next to her. Like Marie-Josée and Julie, Catherine is a French speaker and a surgeon committed to advocating for a national action plan for endometriosis. And next you'll see Natasha, who you know is our moderator and a PhD researcher, but she's also very passionate about medical education and making sure that the next generation of clinicians knows more about endometriosis. I also want to thank the creative agency Mass Velocity, who build our website and keep it running. Again, without them, we would be lost. And I want to thank the UBC Community University Engagement Support Office, or I did end up having to say it one more time, for giving us funding support. Last and certainly not least, I want to thank all of you who are here today on a Thursday evening. If you don't have endometriosis and you're here as an ally, thank you. This campaign and community needs your support. If you do live with endometriosis, we know it has been a tough week, especially we know the pandemic has been brutal, and we're really grateful to all of you for sharing your energy and time with us tonight. With that, thank you, good night, and let's make this National Action Plan happen. See ya.